A tense immigration hearing took a dramatic turn when Congressman Jamie Raskin questioned why ICE released a violent offender years before a deadly murder, shifting blame away from local officials and directly toward failures in federal immigration enforcement.
Expired?
Yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Raskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did you want to address that, Mr. Beer?
Yeah, real quickly. I mean, we have multiple appeals court's decisions directly on the point of denying funding to jurisdictions based on the fact that they have Democratic leadership. The point about the Medicaid expansion in the Obamacare case, it was directly related. It was healthcare spending that they were making contingent on expanding Medicaid. The Supreme Court said you cannot coerce states and localities to adopt federal policy using money in this way. So there's no question it's unconstitutional for Congress to do this.
And I think that's the position anyone who's a real champion of federalism and states' rights would hold, which is what you can't do indirectly, you can't do indirectly through the coercive use of money. You can't give a state a Godfather offer, which is basically, you do what we say or else. So Commonwealth's Attorney Toscano, Sheriff Kincaid, I don't know if either of you can answer a few questions I've got. It seems to me like the whole premise of this hearing is to blame you for the terrible murder and tragedy of Stephanie Minter. But here's what I don't understand. The guy was being held for 2 years in 2018 and 2019 by ICE under the first Trump administration. Why was he not deported then? Why did he end up back on the streets? Why didn't ICE release him? Can you tell me why, Mr. Toscano? Do you know, or Ms. Kincaid?
Well, that's a good question, and that's something that I would refer to ICE on because they did have him in custody. And when he showed up back in our jurisdiction in 2022, we wondered the same.
It's just fascinating to me that we've got 7 witnesses here, and somebody else who's not here, in addition to Stephanie, is ICE. ICE cannot account for it. Well, I'll get to you if I've got enough time. So that's baffling to me. That's puzzling. But I've been asking about that for the last couple of days. Somebody said, well, he was from Sierra Leone, and Sierra Leone didn't want to take him back. But of course, as we know, this administration has no problem deporting people to third-party countries, removing them to third-party countries. Why wasn't he removed by ICE? They're the only ones who've got the power to kick him out of the country. You don't have the power to deport him, do you, State's Attorney?
No, sir, I don't have the power, and quite frankly, there's nothing in my policies. If somebody is deportable when they come to my office, there's nothing in my power to change that.
So do you know exactly how many violent crimes he had committed before he was in the custody of ICE? Because there were reports that he had committed, I think, a stabbing and some assaults.
I don't know the exact number, but I believe there were multiple.
So ICE was aware this guy's a violent criminal, they're holding him, and they release him back in the streets. Then you do your job, and your only job, which is to prosecute those offenses. And you did that, right?
Yes, sir, and we got a multi-year jail sentence as well.
Okay, and Sheriff Kincaid, if I'm understanding you properly, ICE did not issue detainers when he was held for those offenses, or they did once and you complied with it, but on the other ones they didn't issue. As I understand it, ICE didn't come forward with a detainer until after Stephanie Minter was killed. Is that right?
And a time before when we had to relocate this individual to a different facility. Other than that, there were no detainers at all. Okay,
and again, I feel like we're in a courtroom in Fairfax County, Virginia, or in the Richmond legislature. Obviously, if somebody doesn't like the job that the sheriff is doing, somebody doesn't like the job the Commonwealth's attorney is doing, run against them. I mean, one of these sounded, Mr. Kennedy, you sound like a campaign speech you were making. You've got the right to run against him. Have you faced a re-election yet?
Yes, sir, and I won with 77% of my community's vote.
And are you elected, Sheriff Kincaid, or are you appointed?
No, I'm elected.
And have you won re-election?
Several times with the majority of the vote.
Okay, and I take it that all of these issues, which are complicated, which are a result of the failure of Congress to actually engage in comprehensive immigration reform, are heavily debated in Fairfax County. And we don't need to kick off your next re-election with debates here about your performance in office. And I think that that's beneath the dignity of this committee to be telling local officials they should be defeated or should resign from office. That doesn't make sense to me. Mr. Beer, what should Congress be doing to get us out of this constant immigration nightmare? We almost had a big bipartisan deal at the end of 2024. Everybody in the Senate agreed to it. All the Democrats in the House agreed to it. And then I think Donald Trump said, I don't want a deal. I want an issue to run on. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, as you said, we need bipartisan immigration reform.
Suspend for a moment. The gentleman's time's expired. I'll give you a very brief time to answer that question. You can also respond to it in later questions.
We need to get back to legality and orderly immigration, and that means a process for people who are peaceful people to get legal status, and for people who are peaceful to come here legally. That's bipartisan immigration reform, in my opinion.
Chairman Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me first introduce Mr. Biggs for a unanimous consent request.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
here's a series of articles. I'll just do a few of them and then give the whole stack to you. Virginia murder suspect in bus stop stabbing had lengthy criminal history, multiple drop charges. Abdul Jalad allegedly killed Stephanie Minter at Fairfax County bus shelter after prosecutors dropped charges.
The congressional hearing became increasingly heated as Congressman Jamie Raskin pushed back against attempts to blame local Virginia officials for the tragic murder of Stephanie Minter. Instead, Raskin redirected attention toward federal immigration enforcement failures, repeatedly questioning why ICE had previously detained the suspect during the first Trump administration but ultimately released him back into the country. His line of questioning shifted the tone of the hearing from local accountability to a broader debate over federal immigration policy and enforcement responsibility. Raskin emphasized that local prosecutors and sheriffs do not possess the authority to deport individuals from the United States. During the exchange, both the Commonwealth Attorney and Sheriff acknowledged that deportation authority rests entirely with federal immigration agencies like ICE. That distinction became central to Raskin's argument. He suggested that critics were unfairly targeting local Democratic officials for a tragedy that may have involved failures at the federal level years earlier. By highlighting the suspect's prior criminal history and ICE detention record, Raskin attempted to expose what he saw as inconsistencies in the hearing's political framing. The hearing also exposed deeper divisions over how immigration enforcement should operate between federal and local governments. Witnesses discussed detainer requests, jail transfers, and communication gaps between ICE and local jurisdictions. Raskin repeatedly returned to one question: if the suspect was already known to federal authorities and had allegedly committed prior violent offenses, why wasn't he removed from the country when ICE had custody of him? That question appeared to frustrate some Republicans on the committee, who were focused more heavily on local prosecution decisions and so-called sanctuary policies. Another major moment came when Raskin defended the legitimacy of locally elected officials who were being criticized during the hearing. He pointed out that both the sheriff and prosecutor had won re-election with strong support from voters in their communities. Raskin argued that Congress should not act like a local campaign stage by publicly demanding resignations or political defeats for officials chosen by their constituents. That argument transformed the hearing into something larger than immigration enforcement alone. It became a debate over federalism, local democracy, and whether Congress was politicizing a tragedy for partisan purposes. Toward the end of the exchange, the discussion widened into the broader national immigration debate. Raskin referenced the collapse of a bipartisan immigration reform deal and suggested that political interests may have prevented meaningful reform from moving forward. Witnesses largely agreed that the country needs a more functional immigration system that balances border enforcement with legal pathways for peaceful immigrants. While Republicans focused on violent crime and enforcement failures, Democrats emphasized systemic breakdowns and the lack of comprehensive reform. The hearing ultimately reflected how immigration remains one of the most emotionally and politically charged issues in American politics, especially when tied to heartbreaking criminal cases.